Signal Media's Disruptive by Design, podcast host Kimberly Underwood interviews Brian Cook, the Technical Director of 16th Air Force, Air Force's Cyber, about the service's Phoenix Initiative, an effort to help pull in more innovation through improved relationships. The Phoenix Initiative is designed to be an innovation incubator, focusing on forging a community and culture of innovation, thought leadership, and mission enhancement. Tune into the discussion to learn more.
So thanks, Kimberly. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. So as Ms. Coombs identified, right, I'm the 16th Air Force Technical Director, and something I like to highlight up front is a lot of folks think like, oh, 16th Air Force and Air Force is cyber. You're all about the cyber mission force, doing offensive and defensive cyber, and the answer is yeah, absolutely, and it's an important part of our mission set, but not the only, right? So, I mean, you're probably tracking, we have global intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. We have electromagnetic warfare, information operations, global weather, space and terrestrial, right? We help with nuclear treaty monitoring under an international agreement, and other activities as well. But, I mean, those are some big mission sets that we have. So I'd just like to highlight that there's a lot within the portfolio. I was brought on by General Hawk before he moved up to be the Director of NSA and the Commander for U.S. Cyber Command. So I've been in the position for just over 2 years. Most of that time was spent with General Kennedy before he retired, and now I'm working directly for General Hensley.
Well, great. It's nice to meet you. And I've done some reporting of Air Force's cyber over the years, and I'm excited to learn about the Phoenix Initiative. It's something that's new to me, so I'd love to know kind of all the where, why, what, when, all about it, I guess. But can you maybe do an introductory kind of overview of what is the initiative?
Sure. So the initiative started under General Kennedy's tenure, and really it was us taking a look at being more deliberate. So improving our being deliberate with industry and academic institutions, but even within government kind of science and technology and research and development organizations. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't like it wasn't happening before. It wasn't maybe as deliberate as we wanted it to be, and so we wanted to be able to have those enhanced partnerships with those entities. And the reason is because of what? We wanted to help drive modernization in the way of thought, modernization in the way of potentially bringing technologies and capabilities in, or the insights into them, into our force. And so that helped to drive a lot of that. We believe that, for our more active and offensive capabilities, so offensive cyber and electromagnetic attack, probably within the DoD and within the Air Force, we're going to be like the leads in those areas. Lead from an innovative, lead for thoughts, lead maybe with capabilities. There are industry members that are helping to support in that regard, don't get me wrong, but the pool is probably not as large as in all of the other mission spaces that we have responsibility for. And in those areas, if you have industry that's investing in research and development, and you have faculty, part of academic institutions that are leading research, both basic and maybe advanced research, we want to be able to tap into that. And in those areas, we want to be the early adopters of that technology and those innovative thoughts, or the fast followers. And that's the whole thought behind kind of the Phoenix Initiative, was to get into that innovative thought, get into the advanced kind of technologies and capabilities, and that was the industry part. The academic part as well was because of things that are happening there. We wanted to establish relationships with those academic institutions that up to the start of the initiative, we didn't have. Our subordinate organizations had direct relationships with some academic institutions, but at the headquarter level, we did not. And so what we started to do is started a regional focus to take a look at those that we should start with, and then we'll look to branch out as applicable later on. And so we reached an agreement with the University of Texas system level. And so in that regard, we're already starting relationships, or activities, I should say, not relationships, but activities with the University of Texas El Paso and the University of Texas San Antonio. And some of the efforts that we're looking at there are malware analysis. We're looking at understanding kind of operational technologies and the Internet of Things, right? What vulnerabilities exist out there? What are the things that we need to be looking at? 5G is another thing, right? So We built that out there, and then we also have relationships with our Air Force Academy, Air Force Institute of Technology, and Air University, because we send folks through those programs every year. And so the nice thing about what we're doing with industry, with academic institutions, is we're working to link them to our operational missions. And that's what they're thirsty for. They're like, oh my goodness, you mean that I can actually do research, I can write a paper, I can do things that would be linked to operational interest and potentially eventually outcomes? Love it. And so there's a lot of appetite. And then one more thing that I'll add on that is what we've kind of put in with the Air Force academic institution side is, so we also every year send Air Force fellows into industry as part of the education with industry. So we call them the EWIs, but EWI, right? Education with industry. And so they're in with Google's, and they're in with, Amazon Web Services and these others. And so what we highlighted is, hey, here's our research interest. As you go in and work 10 months to a year with them, keep these things in mind and help us from an operational perspective. And so there's a lot of interest.
Right, absolutely. And how did you talked about kind of, some organizations within AppCyber had some relationships with academia or industry, but how are you going about this kind of deliberate engagement, and how are you structuring, what's the thought behind how you're structuring these partnerships? How are you organizing to do that, to pursue these, I guess?
Absolutely. So the venues, so we have to continue down the path of figuring out, now that we've got agreements in place, which are semi-recent, say with the academic institutions. Now, what does it look like to be repeatable right through the process, right? So right now we have regular meetings, like our subordinate organizations that are working with the University of Texas El Paso. They have like biweekly meetings, and the same with UTSA. We have folks that are meeting with them on a regular basis. We want to continue those. But similar to what happened, so we're part of U.S. Cyber Command's Academic Engagement Network that has 120 plus academic institutions. What they do is they do a call out every year for the service component. So we as AppCyber get an opportunity to provide them, hey, here's our research interest. They kick that out, and then they kind of sponsor monthly tech talks or, biweekly, whatever, tech talks and things of that nature over the course of the year. So we're looking to see if we can institute something similar, not trying to duplicate or replicate that's already being done, because we already have access to those academic institutions. But some of those that we're starting to work with aren't necessarily part of that environment, part of that academic network for Cyber Command. And so we want to look to be able to do the same. So we are being deliberate with them. But we're looking to see if we bring others in, what might that look like, and do we do something at the beginning of the year to kick that off? And then for industry, we're using venues such as our public speaking opportunities. So you mentioned the Alamo ACE, event coming up in November. The one thing that we like about that, right, that's an annual ability for us, because on the Thursday morning of that week, we bring them in, we invite industry in, and we do a classified version. And so what we heard from industry is, we don't want to hear your mission briefs. We don't care about your mission briefs. We want to understand what are your tough problems and what are the things that you're attempting to tackle that we could potentially help you with. And so by having that deliberate annual engagement, that allows us to kind of provide focus to things that we're interested in, and we find benefit in that. And then other speaking, so General Hensley spoke recently in Alabama at the Department of Air Force IT Cyber Symposium. And so he highlighted things that, we're looking at there, right? We are trying to look at our Air Force Information Network, which is, over 850,000 endpoints, or actually it's, endpoints and over 1 million users, and how do we protect and secure that information, network and environment, because it ties into our Air Force Core mission sets.
Right, and you talked about kind of how Air Force Cyber can be, in a way, leading offensive cyber and EW as far for the service, given your technology capabilities and know-how. I guess how do you see the initiative helping airmen within AppCyber specifically? You mentioned kind of broadly, but kind of what are the nuts and bolts of what an airman within AppCyber could gain from this?
From this, so what we've seen so far, so based on our relationships, I'll use DARPA as an example. Based on that, and we link that with Cyber Command, but based on that, what we've seen is that they've identified some pretty cutting-edge technologies. I've taken then those technologies and exposed them to a few of our operational squadrons. Those operational squadrons have identified that, you know what, those absolutely are things that we need to help from a day-to-day operational perspective. And so what we've done is we're working to sign up as the operational sponsors of those technologies, working with DARPA and Cyber Command to take a look at how do we get those across the valley of death, if you will, and transfer them in. So we provide, what happens is when we have these engagements, is we share the information with our operational units that we believe they would be best aligned to get their insights and thoughts. And if there's interest, then we continue to pull that thread to see okay, are there opportunities now to work together to align that to an operational mission? So as an example would be, so it puts it in their hands, has something transferred across to them in their hands today. Not exactly transferred in yet. However, there are things that are moving down that path, right? So we're getting them closer to being over the valley of death to where they could be in the hands. But what we need to do is make sure that we provide that, operational sponsorship, the insights, and then what we have to take a look at doing is then how do we program for those activities so that when they transfer, they're able to be sustained coming in. The other thing is we're working with AFRL, so the Air Force Research Lab, AFWorks in particular, and so they support the Small Business Innovative Research, so Innovation Research, SBIRs, and then STTRs, which is the Small Business Tech Transfer Research. And in that regard, we've had companies approach us based on their understandings of our mission activities, and they said, hey, we would like to put in a proposal for these things to help prove these things, this technology and capability out. Would you be interested in signing an endorsement letter? Would you be interested in being the operational sponsors if, in fact, AFRL decides to provide the dollars and invest in the proofs of concept and the demonstrations of the capabilities that are being proposed? And I would say that we've actually improved in that regard. There was an initial thought that if we signed up for those things, the SBIRs and the STTRs, that if the technology proved useful, that all of a sudden we were signing up for long-term sustainment. And that's not what that program is for. That program is meant for these proposals to take a look at, helping us with hard problems. And then we will make a determination at the end, if it met it, and then how do we work the programmatic piece of things.
Got it, sure. And do you have specific goals for FY25 that you're working on or that your team is working on?
So I would say that, so goals being kind of where we have interest, continuing to support automation and just day-to-day staff work, but automation in the way all of our airmen, no matter what their functional areas are, and the way they're able to do their business. So instead of, taking in this massive amount of data and creating spreadsheets and then creating PowerPoint and doing things of that nature, how do we automate that in such a way that you get it to where you have dashboards that are timely and relevant versus a snapshot in time? And so we're looking at things related to automation. We're also looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning. We're not like, machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to solve all of our problems, and we're going to, we're going to be able to reduce the number of airmen and things of that nature that we have. That's not what we're looking at all, right? We think, though, that AI and ML could be an enabler, and so we're partnering with AFRL and then national agencies within the intelligence community that have quite a bit of expertise there to see what they're working on. How do we partner with them? And they have relationships with industry, and then taking a look at how do we bring that over, right? So automation, AI, ML, and then and I'll echo what General Hensley's highlighted before, which is, when we look at our Air Force Information Network, so you have unclassified and classified components of that network, right? Systems and architectures. But outside of that, still part of the network are command and control nodes and links, ICS, SCADA, weapon systems, and things of that nature. Having an understanding of what are all of those pieces and parts, how do you get to where you sense them, make sense of that's happening in those areas, and then how do you secure and defend them so that we have a more secure, robust Air Force Information Network. those are some of the highlights. I mean, there are others that highlight, and I'll just throw them out there real quick because it covers on some of the other aspects, which would be what does it look like from a targeting perspective? We have elements that do, intermediate and advanced target system analysis, right, to support combat commands, which ties into like long-range kill chains. And so having, again, an understanding of how do we sense at the edge, how can we compute at the edge, how can we get the information to those and keep it at the edge so that if we're in a degraded and disconnected environment, we can still operate and perform, is critical to our operations.
Got it, sure. Yeah, Secretary Kendall mentioned kind of targeting system analysis, I think, this morning, and so I guess that was what...
It links into that, absolutely.
Yeah. And then what are the challenges of what you're trying to achieve through the Phoenix Initiative? What's hard about it, or...
I would say that... So those areas that are going to be our focuses in 25 are still some of the ones that we're carrying over from 24. What's hard about it is folks are so busy with day-to-day operations that just want getting them to back away and think about their problem sets a little bit and then capture them in a way that we can more easily communicate with, those entities that I mentioned is a thing. The other thing that makes it hard is the resourcing. And that was mentioned by Air Force leadership as well.
Right, sure.
Having the resources to create an environment. So if you see promising technology and you want to bring it in and use it and evaluate it with your data sources and data streams, do you have the environment where you can test and demonstrate and use it in such a manner that would be relevant operationally? And so having the resources that enable some of that to occur are absolutely essential.
And I know it's early, but any lessons learned from the starting activities that you all have pursued so far?
Yeah, so a couple of things that happened up front under the large Phoenix Initiative umbrella was Project Phoenix, which was looking at our no-fail missions, the critical capabilities that enable those no-fail missions, so the missions that our nation calls on us to do every day, the capabilities that underpin them, and then where we're vulnerable and fragile, and looking at all of the dependencies that are out there that enable those systems to operate and execute those missions. Well, what we found is, that is very complicated because we have dependencies on local entities, on state entities, on federal entities, on power companies, on water companies, so having the time for folks to step back and do that more in-depth analysis to understand where we need to put our weight of effort, where we need to put our resources, is something that we're going to have to get at. And I know that some of our organizations, so that I mentioned, looking at those no-fail missions, that was an effort that I led for the past year, and we just kind of, I don't want to say wrapped up, because wrapped up's not a good word because it's not done, but we put a bow on the first year. That included all of our 10 wings, bringing representatives in to support this activity.
Got it, sure. And then, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but any advice to industry or academia who are hearing about this, want to get involved? How do they go about doing that? Yeah,
that's great. So what's been highlighted is, one, they can reach out to me. We're likely going to set up something on the 16th Air Force AFCyber webpage that has a direct link to the initiative, so that comes to me. Additionally, we have a commercial solutions opening for industry. So commercial solutions opening, a CSO, that sits out on sam.gov. Right now, I don't have any active or open calls for topics, but I did, and we've already awarded a contract against that based on our identified research interest, or actually mission interest. And so that's another area where industry can go in, get an account, take a look at those things you're interested in, and then since I don't have an open call, they can still send things in that they believe would be of interest to us, and we can take a look at it, but we just kind of go from there. But key would be they can reach out to me. They can go to our 16th Air Force website once we get certain aspects of that set up, which we're going to be in the development of, and then our CSO is another vehicle. And then we also have an academic engagement website, not a website, but an email queue where folks can go in and do that.
And then is it different for academia, like the types of agreements that you're setting with them to be involved with this initiative, versus the, private sector?
A little bit. So a lot of it is going to be from an academic institution perspective. They are going to be, some of it's going to be basic research that they're going to support, but also then in some instances advanced. And so we have engagements from an academic perspective. We've been engaged with OSD, RNE. We've been engaged with the Air Force Chief Scientist side to take a look at all the way from PhD level STEM students all the way down to those that are pursuing undergraduate degrees. And so we've been working there. It's still some of the similar type research areas, but maybe more fundamental. Some instances we could get into applied, and so we're just looking for them to help us in that regard.
Got it, sure. And anything else we should understand about the initiative or your efforts?
I think that, I highlighted most of it up front, other than the thing that I think is important is that we're opening ourselves up to being able to highlight, like, we're operators, right? We're executing operational missions each and every day, all of those that I mentioned, and the ability to have some level of connection with industry, academic institutions, and the others, I think is what they like the most. What they see the opportunity to actually have an operational impact, from what I've seen, is generated interest. And so I'll just share one example. So I supported a capstone event at the U.S. Air Force Academy this past year, and I linked up with a faculty member and the cadets, and it was focused on being resilient against disinformation, or what we're also calling cognitive security. And the fact that they had an opportunity to take a look at what we were attempting to do to educate the airmen writ large, right? So under the department, starting small, they loved it. And they came into our senior leadership summit a few months back, and they delivered, and the wing commanders and our general officers that were in attendance absolutely loved that.
And would the service component, the elevation of service component commands, including AF-Cyber, would that impact this? I mean, I know that's in the works and it's going through the process.
Yeah,
going through, but
I think the only impact that I could see, right? So depending on what is part of Air Force's cyber and what is part of whatever the other decisions are, that could have an impact, because when I mentioned that we came in and looked at our no-fail missions and we brought in the 10 wings in our center, okay, so the thought is that we're going to continue to focus on our challenges as a group, and even if not everyone's together, what we did note, though, is that our organizations, in many instances, even if they don't fall under the same AF-Cyber 16th umbrella, they're still dependent on the same infrastructure, the same power sources, the same water sources, the same stuff. And so in that regard, we're still going to have to work together, because then it's all of our aspects coming together to deliver information and helping to deliver outcomes. And so we're still, regardless of the umbrella or where everyone aligns, we're still going to be working together in some manner.
Sure.
It just might mean that it's not under the direct command and control of whatever entity it is today.
Sure.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.